Welcome to episode 147 of Gods and Heroes of Ancient Greece. My name is MyLinda Butterworth, and today we continue with the tale of Odysseus and the story of Odysseus Visits the Swineherd. In this shape, Odysseus walked over the hills to the place his patron goddess had described, and there he found Eumaeus, the swineherd, the most faithful of his servants. He was pasturing his herd on a wide piece of ground which he had hedged around with heavy stones. Within this enclosure were 12 pens, in each of which were 50 sows were kept for breeding. The boars, only 360 against 600 sows, were outside the pens. The reason there were so few of these was that day after day the suitors demanded a fatted boar for their feast. 4 dogs, which looked as savage as wolves, guarded the herd. The old man was cutting oxhide for sandals. He was alone. 3 of his 4 helpers were scattered over the meadow with the animals, and a 4th had gone to the city to deliver the daily boar to the palace. The dogs were the first to notice Odysseus. They rushed at him with fierce barks, but all he did was to put aside his staff and sit down. And now he might have suffered the disgrace of being attacked by his own dogs, had not the swineherd hurried to the spot and driven them away with stones. Then he turned to his master, whom he took for a poor beggar, and said, "In another moment the dogs would have torn you to pieces, and a new burden would have been added to the weight of sorrow I already bear. It is bad enough that I must mourn for my master who is far away. Here I sit, and I have to fatten boars for strangers, while he himself perhaps has not even a crust to eat, and wanders in foreign lands. That is, if he is still among the living. But come into my hut, poor old man. Let me give you food and wine, and when you have satisfied your hunger, you can tell me where you have come and what you have suffered to look as wretched as you do." They entered the hut of the swineherd. He heaped twigs and leaves on the floor for a pallet, and covered it over with the shaggy skin of a wild goat. When Odysseus thanked him for his kind reception, Eumaeus replied, "Old man, one should never neglect a guest, not even the poorest. To be sure, I have not much to offer. If my good master had stayed at home, things would be better with me. He would have seen to it that I had a house, land, and a wife. Then I could play the host in quite another fashion. But he is away, perhaps dead. And I wish ill luck of all of Helen's line, she who is responsible for the death of many brave men." So saying, the swineherd bound up his tunic with his belt and went to the pens where there were countless young pigs. He took 2 and slaughtered them to have something to set before his guests. And then he cut up the meat, sprinkled it with white flour, and roasted it on the spits, handed it to Odysseus. From a large jug he poured honey-sweet wine into a wooden bowl, seated himself opposite him, and said, "Eat now, stranger. This is the best I have to offer. It is only the meat of young pigs, for the suitors get all the fatted boars. They are insolent men, with even less fear of the gods than pirates. They must have heard that my master is dead, for they do not woo his wife according to the custom of righteous men. They never return to their own homes at all, but stay here, squandering the property of Odysseus. They do not slaughter his cattle once or even twice a day, but every hour, and they eat and drink day and night. My lord is as rich as 20 other kings put together. He has 12 herds of cattle, and as many herds of sheep, swine, and goats on his farms where his herdsmen and servants tend them for him. Here alone he has 11 flocks of goats watched over by faithful men, but each man is forced to deliver a he-goat to the suitors day after day. I take care of his swine, and every morning I too must send those greedy guzzlers a boar." As the herdsman talked, Odysseus quickly ate the meat and drained his cup without answering, like one who is not thinking of what he is doing. His mind was already intent on the revenge he was going to take on the suitors. When he had satisfied his hunger and thirst, and Eumaeus had filled his bowl again, he drank to his health and said in a kind voice, "Describe your master to me in greater detail, my friend. It is quite possible that I know him, that I have met him somewhere, for I have been around the world quite a bit." But the swineherd had small faith in this possibility. "Do you think it would be easy for a stranger, a wayfarer, to make us believe what he tells us about our master?" he said. "During the past years, vagabonds who wanted food and shelter have frequently come to my mistress and her son and told them tales of our dear Lord, who moved them to tears. But I am certain they lied to get food or clothing, and that dogs and birds have devoured his flesh, or fish have eaten it, and that his bare bones are bleaching on some alien shore. Never again will I have so good a master. He was a kind and thoughtful man. When I think of it, is less as my lord than as an elder brother." "Well, then, because your doubting heart denies so firmly that he will return," Odysseus says, "I swear to you that he will. I do not lie like other men who only wanted to get a new tunic or mantle with their tails. I shall not expect rewards until he returns. Though I am in rags and tatters, I shall tell you only the truth. Before the year is up, I swear it by Zeus, by your hospitable board, and by the herds of Odysseus, your master will enter his house and punish the suitors who dare to make the life of his wife and son a burden to them." "Old man," said Eumaeus, "I shall not have to reward you for your prediction, for Odysseus will not return. Do not spin out your foolish fancies. Drink your wine and let us talk of other things. I shall not hold you to your oath. I have no hopes concerning Odysseus, but I am troubled about Telemachus. I hope to see him like his father, both in body and spirit. But a god or mortal has addled his brain, for he has gone to Pylos to make inquiries about my master. In the meantime, the suitors are lying in ambush, waiting to kill him, the last scion of the old age of Acrisius. But now tell me of your own griefs. Who are you, and what has brought you to Ithaca?" Odysseus amused himself by telling the swineherd a long story in which he presented himself as the impoverished son of a rich man on the island of Crete, and invented the wildest adventures. He claimed to have been in the war of Troy, and to have come across Odysseus there. On the way home, he said a tempest had cast him ashore on the coast of Thesprotians, whose king had given him news of Odysseus. The king said that he had been his guest a short time ago, and that he had left to travel to the oracle of Dodona to hear the bidding of Zeus. When Odysseus had finished his web of lies, the swineherd said, "Unhappy stranger, how you have touched me to the quick with the descriptions of your wanderings. The only thing I do not believe is what you have told me about Odysseus. The Aetolian assured me years ago that he had seen my master on Crete, where he was mending his ship. He said Odysseus was certain to come home that very summer, or in the autumn at the latest. And he invented all those lies because he was being hunted for murder and wanted to ingratiate himself with me. Ever since then, I have been suspicious of anyone who claims to have seen Odysseus. You shall enjoy my hospitality without being driven to lies." "Let us make a bargain," said Odysseus. "If your master really returns, you shall give me a tunic and mantle and send me to Dulichium, where I want to go. If he does not, bid your helpers cast me from a cliff into the sea as an example to other beggars giving to lie." "That would be a small glory for me," the swineherd objected. "How could I kill the guest I took into my own hut? If I did that, I could never pray to Zeus any more. But it is time for our supper. The rest will soon be here, and then we shall make merry together." Shortly after this, the other herdsmen arrived, and Eumaeus had them slaughter a 5-year-old boar in honor of his guest. Part of it was offered up to the nymphs and the god Hermes. The men had an ample share, but the best pieces, cut from the back, were given to the guest, even though he looked like a beggar to his host. This moved Odysseus, and he cried out gratefully, "May Zeus cherish you, Eumaeus, as you have cherished me, though I am sorry enough to look at." The swineherd thanked him and pressed him to eat. While they feasted, clouds drove across the moon. The west wind howled around the hut, and rain began to fall in torrents. Odysseus felt cold in his beggar rags, and in order to attract his host's attention to his plight and induce him to offer his own warm mantle, he began to tell him a story he invented on the spur of the moment. "Listen, Eumaeus, and you other herdsmen," he said. "Your wine has loosened my tongue, and I am tempted to relate what had perhaps better be left unsaid. Once, during the siege of Troy, when the three of us, Odysseus, Menelaus, and myself, together with our warriors, lay in ambush in a reedy swamp close to the walls of the city, night fell, and it became very cold. The north wind blew flurries of snow about us, and soon our shields were rimmed with ice. This did not matter to my friends. They wrapped themselves in their mantles and slept warmly enough. But I had left my mantle behind in the camp, since I had not counted on such weather. Now, a good part of the night was still to come, and I knew that it would be coldest just before dawn. So I nudged Odysseus, who lay beside me, with my elbow, and said to him, "If this cold keeps up, I shall freeze to death." An evil god prompted me to set out in nothing but my tunic. When Odysseus heard this, he whispered back, "Don't let anyone hear you. You shall have what you need." He crooked his elbow, raised his head a little, and called softly to the others, "Friends, the gods have sent me a warning dream. It seems we have ventured too far from our ships. Will not one of you go and ask Agamemnon to send us more men?" At his words, Thos, son of Andromon, jumped up, eager to do his bidding, flung his mantle to the ground, and ran off to the camp. I picked it up, wrapped it around me, and slept comfortably until morning. If it were as young and strong now as I was then, perhaps some herdsman here would lend me his mantle to shelter me from the cold of night. But old and poor as I am, no one cares how much I freeze in these rags of mine. "That was a fine hint you gave us in your tale," said Eumaeus, laughing. "We shall certainly take it, and you shall lack neither clothing nor anything else. Tomorrow you must put on your rags again, though, for we have no mantles to spare. But should the son of Odysseus return safely, he will surely give you a tunic and mantle, and have you conducted wherever you wish to go." And with that, Eumaeus took soft fleeces and heaped them near the hearth. When Odysseus lay down on them, the swineherd covered him with his own thick mantle, while the others also settled down to sleep. He himself took his weapons in hand and prepared to spend the night near the pens. He took a shaggy goat skin to shield him from the wind, and another to serve as bedding. In his hand he carried a sharp spear to fend off thieves or dogs. Odysseus watched him leave the hut and felt glad that he had a faithful servant who cared for his master's possessions so conscientiously, even though he thought him dead. And here is where I end my tale for today. But I'll be back with more tales. Many more tales. Until then, my friends, enjoy the journey.